Who we are, who we were, and who we're destined to become are all reflections of the stories we tell, of gods and devils, from tales of the heart to those of fear and foreboding. Stories shape us and the world we live in. Myths, folk tales, and even religious parables all define our cultures and beliefs. In each episode of Faith and Fear, we will dip our toes into the comparative narratives spanning the globe, considering the concepts and archetypes common to us all. Enle, Shalom, and Prazir. Hello and peace. It's a pleasure. I want to thank you for following me down the rabbit hole once again in my journey to better understand the stories and beliefs that shape us. Brandon Sanderson, fantasy and science fiction writer, once said, "The purpose of a storyteller is not to tell you how to think, but to give you questions to think upon." This week, I want to start off talking about the trickster archetype. Trickster figures are extremely common in mythology and folklore. These characters are usually cunning, charming, and tend to be neither entirely good or evil. And they of course have the habit of playing tricks on those around them, doing whatever they feel necessary to achieve their desired goal. Some of the most well-known tricksters are Loki from Norse mythology, the Greek Hermes, Coyote of the Native Americas, Brer Rabbit, and Reynard the Fox. Of course, there are many others, but the one I want to focus on is one of my favorites, Anansi the Spider. Anansi, one of the most important figures in West African folklore, is much more than a trickster deity. He is also the god of knowledge and god of stories. Through his own cleverness, Anansi was able to overcome multiple obstacles demanded of him by the sky god Nyame. Because of his efforts, the world gained the gift of storytelling. Storytelling is at the core of human language, a language that does not always need words to be understood. It is as versatile as it is significant to us as a species. Many cultures began their storytelling with oral traditions, and since I started with Anansi, let's take a look at his home, West Africa. West Africa is known to have strong storytelling customs. Villagers gathered around the campfire for generations to listen to their sacred storyteller, the Griot. In places like Mali, Niger, Senegal, and Gambia, the griots are one part narrator, one part historian, and the traditional keepers of the culture. They are known to preserve lineages and family genealogies, telling stories while also playing instruments such as the lute like kora. They served as court musicians, sang at weddings, and had important roles in numerous other ceremonies and religious celebrations. The griot not only entertained but educated their people, and have even been known to perform and act as messengers for nobility. They served as counselors and ambassadors, their role being extremely important and representative of a high level of status. In Ireland, traditional Gaelic storytellers were known as the Seanchai, or Seanchaid in Scotland. These keepers of local lore were said to travel from village to village, narrating ancient tales of adventure and wisdom, ensuring the continued glory of great kings and heroes. They not only passed on important myths and legends, but also served as the custodians of history, spreading information and sharing recent news. In Celtic Irish culture, bards were of high status, second only to kings. The Choctaw, like many Native American tribes, have a great tradition of oral storytelling. These stories represented generations of history and were meant to not only preserve the old, but to educate and shape the new. Much like many African narratives, Choctaw stories often involved animal characters whose purpose was to educate the young through entertaining ways. But here, storytelling wasn't reserved as the role of only a few. Any member of the tribe could recite these tales. It was everyone's duty to share and pass forward these stories to future generations. The tradition is cyclical. Children learn these tales while they're young to in turn pass them on as adults. It wasn't until after the Choctaw English Dictionary was published in 1915, due to the efforts of a missionary translating the native language, that the Choctaw stories were able to be preserved in actual print. In the Jewish faith, the Seder is a storytelling ritual and an important part of the Passover celebration, recounting the exodus of the Jewish people from slavery in ancient Egypt. This is a sacred tradition meant to educate the young, who serve to incite the story by asking the Ma Nishtana, the 4 questions, as an opening part of the ceremony. During the Seder, Jewish families drink wine, eat specially prepared foods, read, sing, and tell stories. On the first night of Passover, the Seder is held after nightfall and during a meal, begins with the stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The narrative retells the pain and persecution of the Jewish people, the plagues sent by God to punish the Pharaoh, and continues with the migration from Egypt and across the Red Sea. This is, of course, a huge simplification of the Seder and Passover celebrations. Calypso is defined as an Afro-Caribbean, Trinidadian, and West Indian music style that was originally developed in the early 20th century. Characterized as having narrative lyrics describing daily, local life, and dramas, it has been used to share news, express daily struggles, and even as a tool to vocalize political issues. An evocative form of storytelling, Calypso has served heavily as a weapon against social injustice and political corruption. To that end, it has often been prone to government censorship. This type of musical storytelling continues to be a tool for the people to preserve their history and culture, as well as to empower themselves against the wrongdoings of their government. Arabic Zajal is a traditional form of oral poetry, semi-improvised, semi-sung, that originated in Lebanon and is practiced across the Middle East. The performance requires artistic skill and improvisation, as the performers must be clever and serve their poems with style and vigor. Zajal could be described as a sort of poetry slam or rap battle, poets facing off against one another in competitive verse, together creating a single narrative. Inspired by Greek theater, Cunto is an ancient Sicilian form of storytelling that balances both spoken and sung verse with heavy improvisation. Stories most often depict epic tales of heroes and are performed live on a small stage, while modern versions often detail daily Sicilian life and struggles. Occasionally, these stories are told with marionettes or with few to no props, but traditionally, the contisti or storyteller needs only the skills passed down from father to son, having first studied as an apprentice, to conjure up these images of epic battles and legendary warriors. During the Edo period, Japanese Rakugo was developed by Buddhist monks as an entertaining form of storytelling for religious sermons. The Hanashika acted as the lone storyteller, remaining seated on a stage in the traditional seiza position. He would then recount a long, detailed story, often comedic in nature. It was their duty to captivate their audience by bringing humor into tales of everyday life, much like present-day comedians. A number of theaters hosting live Rakugo performances still exist today, continuing the tradition. When it comes to dancing and non-traditional forms of storytelling, native Hawaiian hula is probably the first that comes to mind. In the islands, hula is far more than just a dance. Combining the language of creative movement with chants or songs, hula tells myths, creation lore, and other native cultural stories. Traditionally oral, Hawaiian stories preserved local genealogy and history, storytellers serving as honored members of society. Hula dance combined with mele song or ole chants does more than just entertain. It exists to also pass on important values and traditions to the next generation. Indian Baharatanatyam originated in Tamil Nadu and is another form of narrative dance. Traditionally only performed solo and by women, it uses evocative footwork and precise hand gestures in order to tell stories. These tales are often of the Hindu religion, entailing mythic legends and spiritual ideals, expressed by the beauty of such classical Indian dance forms. Originating thousands of years ago during the Han Dynasty, classic shadow puppetry was used to illustrate folk stories, teach lesson of moral values, local customs, and traditions. Made from seemingly simple materials, leather or paper shaped into silhouettes, puppet performances were special events, most often taking place at weddings, funerals, and other celebrations and religious festivals. The puppets were often accompanied by singers and musicians, or sometimes even sang themselves. It is an art form whose popularity has spread throughout Southeast Asia, becoming greatly valued, especially by communities made of the working class. Storytelling, in all its forms, is one of the greatest languages humanity possesses. Obviously, in the examples I've mentioned, it has been crucial to our ability to preserve history and to teach following generations the customs and traditions we value, even before we were ever capable of written words. These are in no way the only types of cultural storytelling that exists, but are only a few examples to perhaps broaden your horizons. We each have our own story to tell, our own trials, our own values and traditions, our own history, each worthy of being told. So tell me, how will you preserve yours? I want to close out this episode with another quote. We are all storytellers. We all live in a network of stories. There isn't a stronger connection between people than storytelling. Jimmy Neal Smith, director of the International Storytelling Center. Next week, we'll be talking about early American folklore, particularly African American folklore and slave stories. For now, assalamu alaikum and namaste. Peace be with you until we meet again. Music brought to you from Pixabay. Thanks for listening to me as I've nerded out about stories and beliefs. Join me next week as I journey down the rabbit hole once again by subscribing and listening wherever podcasts are available. Who knows, maybe then we'll be one step closer to glimpsing the true nature of faith and fear.